Hello students, today we are going to complete our checks and balances flowchart that you have on paper. We are going to be using page 8 of the yellow Constitution Guide under the heading, the System of Checks and Balances. So we are going to read the first paragraph here to begin filling out our flowchart. So, an additional safeguard, the framers established a system of checks and balances which each branch of government can check or limit the power of the other branches. This system helps maintain balance in the power of the three branches. So on your flowchart, that looks like this, we are going to be putting our answer up here where it says checks and balances is, okay? So checks and balances, it tells us right here, is a system that allows each branch to check or limit the power of another branch to make sure that no one branch has too much power. This is to maintain the balance of power. So we have learned a little bit about checks and balances before, basically just the definition. And today we are going to go over exactly how that works with specific examples from the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. So once you have that information written, we are going to move into include some other information that we already should know the answers to as well. So when you are looking at your flowchart, once again, you are going to be writing your answers here, here, and here. So the first one that we want to complete is the legislative branch. And what we need to know is who makes up each branch of government. So the legislative branch at this point, we should all know, is Congress. But you should also know that Congress is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. So once again, I will show you on your flowchart. You are going to be writing this information here. And here. So the star is going to be the main duty, and here should say Congress, House of Representatives, and Senate. Next, we're going to look at the executive branch. So the executive branch is made up of the president, the vice president, and cabinet members. And I misspoke before. We are not going to do anything by that star yet. We are only writing our answer here in this space. So that should say president, vice president, and cabinet members. And then the judicial branch is made up of the court system, or courts and judges. So once again, that answer is going to go right here. Okay, so I will rewind again here to show you the answers. The legislative branch is made up of Congress, the House of Representatives, and Senate together make Congress. The executive branch is the president, the vice president, and cabinet members. And the judicial branch is the court system, which is courts and judges. So our next part that we're going to be answering is the main duty of each of those branches. So here is now where we're going to be putting our answers at the stars. It's hard for you to tell that there are stars on mine, but you should be able to see that fairly easily on yours. So the main duty of the legislative branch is to what? That is pass laws or make laws. Either answer is okay. We've talked about this before, that you can do either one. So once again, This answer is going to go right here for legislative branch, pass laws or make laws. The executive branch main job is to carry out the laws. So your answer is going to go here at this star, carry out the laws. And then the judicial branch has two main powers, but one we're going to focus on more than the other. So there's the star answer should say interprets the laws to make sure they are constitutional. And then we're going to also write settle disputes. So this one should be interpret the laws to make sure they're constitutional. And then you'll see a dot down there as well that should say settles disputes. So I'm going to actually jump ahead here. This is kind of what your flow chart should look like right now. I had to kind of squish it together so that it fits on the page a little bit more. So I did not include who is in each branch here, but you'll see carries out laws is by the star, make laws is by the star, study and interpret the law to make sure they're constitutional is by the star. And then I know I have a mark here. It's because of the way that I'm using the document. So this should say settles disputes. Okay, so now to find the other answers that are here in this page, we're going to go back to this article and I'm going to read the legislative branch. So what we're looking for here when I'm reading this is who has the checking power and who are they checking up on? So the legislative branch. Congress makes up the legislative branch. It has two parts, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives has 435 voting members and 5 non-voting delegates from the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and the Virgin Islands. Congress has the power to make laws, amend the Constitution, impose taxes, coin money, and declare war. So what we're going to do here is write the rest of the powers or duties that Congress has, and that we're going to find right here. So we already did make laws, right? We have make laws by the star. That's what you should have. So then we're going to have amend the Constitution, impose taxes, which also means that they control government spending, coin money, which remember means to print money, make the coins, and then declare war. And these are all powers that we have talked about before that the legislative branch has, but we're going to be using them again on this flow chart. So then we look at the executive branch, and the executive branch carries out the laws passed by Congress. It includes the president, vice president, and cabinet. The cabinet is a group of advisors to the president. The executive branch also includes various offices, departments, and agencies. As head of the executive branch, the president has the following roles with specific powers and duties. He is the chief diplomat, which directs foreign policy, appoints ambassadors, and negotiates treaties. He's the commander-in-chief, which commands the military in crisis at home and around the world with congressional approval or declaration of war. He is the head of state, which is the representative of all Americans, the host of foreign ambassadors. He awards honors to deserving Americans. And he's a legislative leader. He sets goals for the legislation and presents these goals to Congress in the annual State of the Union address. So what we're going to use here are specific powers that he has. So chief diplomat, we're not going to write chief diplomat, but we're going to take some of the answers here, which is directs foreign policy, appoints high officials. I know here it says ambassadors, but he also can appoint judges, and he makes treaties. And once again, these are all powers that we've talked about before that the president and executive branch has. Then we see the commander-in-chief, and he commands the military. So that's going to be next, commands the military. And then of this next one, head of state, some of these are not necessarily powers. Representative of all of Americans is not a power. Awarding honors to deserving Americans can be considered to be a power, but it's not one that needs to really be checked up on necessarily. So one that definitely should be included here is the host to foreign ambassadors. So that's part of what he needs to make sure that he's doing when he is meeting with people from other countries. So the judicial branch, we already filled out everything that goes in that box, which means we don't need to read this judicial branch section. We also read this already when we covered Article 3 in our regular notes. So one thing that I want to make clear here to you is that when we're looking at filling out this flow chart, anything that's in an arrow is considered to be what I call a checking power. So I'm going to put that up here. And I suggest that you do that too. Okay, these are checking powers here. Make it a different color, checking powers. And these are checking powers. So you don't have to put this on every single arrow that there is. But just know that all of these arrows are what we call the checking powers. These are their regular powers that they just have as that branch. And then those are the checking powers. So as we scroll down a little bit further here, we're going to look under that heading checks and balances now to get the rest of this information. And as I mentioned before, what we're going to be looking for is who has the checking power and who are they checking up on. And in some cases, this is going to be kind of like a sentence by sentence sort of situation. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. So I'm going to look here at checks and balances. And in the system of checks and balances, Congress can check on the actions of the executive branch. Congress can pass a law, and the president can reject it by vetoing it. Okay, so this is our first one that we're going to look at. So it says Congress can pass a law, which we already know. That's right here, right? And then who is doing something about it? The president is, right? And the president is the executive branch. And what is he doing? He is going to veto that bill is really what it is. So the executive branch has the checking power on the legislative branch to veto bills. However, Congress can override or reverse the president's veto if 2/3 of the members of both houses vote again to approve the law. So here we're talking about Congress. Congress is the legislative branch, right? And so the legislative branch has checking power over the president, who is the executive branch. And what they are going to do is override the president's veto. So next, Congress controls government spending, which we already know. That's part over here, right? They control government spending. And all tax and spending bills begin in the House of Representatives, and they're approved both in the House and in the Senate, and the president will sign them into law. So who is it that is going to be wanting to spend money? It's going to be the executive branch. So they have that power to impose, control government spending. So that means that they approve or disapprove of government spending. The legislative branch does that. Okay. The House can impeach or bring charges against any federal official suspected of a wrongdoing, and the Senate acts as a jury and may remove the official with 2/3 vote. So, who can be impeached? we know that the executive branch, the president, can be impeached, and we also know that judges can be impeached. So in this case, it is the legislative branch who is going to be checking up on both of these branches. So legislative branch is going to check the executive branch by perhaps impeaching and removing a president. But they're also going to check up on the judicial branch by impeaching and removing judges. The Senate can also ratify or reject treaties and approve or disapprove of presidential appointments of federal officials. So again, we're talking about the Senate is going to be having the power to do the checking. So that's legislative branch. And they're checking on treaties. And who does treaties? The executive branch. So they can approve or reject treaties. As head of the executive branch, the legislative leader, the president proposes laws to Congress and works to see that they get passed. So remember, the legislative branch is the one who actually is going to put those bills forward and approve them before the president officially signs them. But the president can tell them what he wants to see get passed. So this is the executive branch checking up on the legislative branch by proposing laws to Congress. The president can veto a bill passed by Congress, and he can also call or adjourn special sessions of Congress. So we already talked about the president doing a veto, right? We have that one right there. But he can also call or adjourn a special session of Congress. So that is the next one. Call or adjourn a special session of Congress. So that is how he is going to be checking up on Congress in that particular situation. Next, when the Supreme Court studies and interprets a law, they may find it to be unconstitutional and repealing it. In doing so, the court provides a check on the powers of Congress and the president. Well, this one can't get too much easier. We have the judicial branch who is doing a check on Congress and the president. So it's going to go in both directions. So from the judicial branch to the executive branch, they can declare executive acts unconstitutional and repeal them. And then this one is going on the bottom arrow here from the judicial branch to the legislative branch. So judicial branch is using the checking power of declaring laws unconstitutional and repealing them or canceling them. So notice that these two are slightly different. Executive acts are different than laws themselves. The president can put forth executive acts without them actually being laws. And so that's why that's worded slightly different. So next, however, Congress can overrule judicial decisions by amending the Constitution. Congress can also amend or change a law so it no longer conflicts with the Constitution. So Congress, legislative branch, is going to overrule judicial branch by amending the Constitution. So that is here, legislative branch is going to use this checking power on the judicial branch to overrule judicial decisions by amending the Constitution. So, for example, Congress changed the ability to have slave trade in the Constitution. They changed that to overrule a judicial decision that said slave trade was legal. And so Congress changed that. The executive branch can also exercise checking power over the judicial decisions by granting a pardon or a reprieve. So remember, we talked about pardons and reprieves can excuse a person from a trial, or it might excuse them from a punishment, or it might suspend the remainder of a punishment. And so this is a check on the judicial branch. If he feels that they wrongly convicted someone, or if he finds that there was more evidence that came into the picture later on, then he can grant a pardon and a reprieve or a reprieve. So then the president and the Senate provide a check on the judicial branch through their power to appoint and approve federal judges. So each one of them has their own jobs here. So president, remember, is executive branch. Senate is in the legislative branch. So the power that the executive branch has is to appoint the judge. So that means that he has a little bit of control over what type of person they put into the Supreme Court specifically. Are they conservative? Are they liberal? Do they have the same sort of values as the president does? He can sort of sway the way that the judicial branch looks. And then the legislative branch can approve or disapprove of those federal judges. So this is going to go in two places, because that is a check up on the executive branch here, because he's the one that appoints them. So they can approve or disapprove the president's appointment of high officials, specifically judges. But that also means that this is a check on the judicial branch. They can approve or disapprove of judges. So Congress can also impeach and remove a federal judge from office. We already know that. We have that here, impeach and remove federal judges. So we're going to go on to the next one, that Congress provides another checking power over the judicial branch by setting up the lower federal courts. So we only have one spot left to go, which is legislative branch to the judicial branch, and they create the lower federal courts. Okay, so if you need to pause this so that you can get more of that information, if it went a little too fast for you, then go ahead and do that. And you should have a completed flow chart, including the definition at the beginning that we did up here. And then you should have who is in each branch of government. And then you should have those main duties on the star parts in your flow chart.